Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we are unpacking a word that absolutely dominates the headlines, but honestly, it's so often fundamentally misunderstood. Yep, we're talking about a recession. Now, we all know the basic textbook definition, right? But today, we're going to roll up our sleeves and look right under the hood at the actual mechanics of an economic slowdown. We're skipping the basic economics 101 lesson because we want to truly grasp the structural forces that shape our financial world. We're going to deconstruct exactly why it happens and explore what it ultimately means for the broader landscape. Let's get into it.
Picture this. You're pouring your morning coffee, you turn on the news, and there it is, the dreaded red ticker tape flashing across the bottom of the screen. The economy has entered a recession. Wow. It's a phrase that feels like it was practically designed by news producers just to induce anxiety, doesn't it? It sounds like this looming, catastrophic storm cloud that's about to just wipe out everything we've built. And frankly, it is completely understandable why that emotional reaction is so common. It feels systemic, it feels massive, and worst of all, it feels entirely out of our individual control.
But hey, instead of panicking, let's take a breath and actually deconstruct the machinery behind that scary headline. Because here's the secret. Once you actually understand the structural mechanics of a slowdown, that headline completely loses its power over you. It really does. Knowledge and preparation are absolutely your best defenses against uncertainty. So let's just strip away the dramatic television music, put aside the raw emotion, and look at the actual facts of what is happening behind the scenes of the economy.
Okay, so at its core, a recession is not an apocalypse. It's really just a deceleration, and it's driven by three interconnected gears: weaker business activity, slower consumer spending, and a softer job market. Think of it like a giant engine. It just means the economic engine isn't running quite as fast or as hot as it was during the boom times. And these three elements, they form this continuous, deeply intertwined loop. Understanding how they feed into each other, well, that is the absolute key to understanding the entire phenomenon without falling for the hype.
Is really a classic feedback loop, like a line of dominoes falling, and it almost always begins with consumer uncertainty. When people become unsure about the future, what do? Their natural response is contraction. They tighten their belts, and that leads directly to reduced spending. Now, that inevitable drop-off directly translates into slower business demand. Companies simply aren't moving as much inventory, right? And that, unfortunately, forces the heaviest consequence of the loop: cost cuts and layoffs. It is a very logical progression where uncertainty breeds contraction, which in turn just breeds even more uncertainty.
To put the sheer scale of this into perspective, remember that consumer spending makes up about 70% of the U.S. economy. 70%. So when we talk about families delaying buying cars, or holding off on those home renovations, or just tightening up their discretionary budgets, we aren't just talking about a few isolated, drifty decisions. When millions of households make that exact same, completely rational choice to pause spending at the exact same time, it causes a massive systemic shock. The capital flow just dries up.
And when that consumer demand vanishes, the corporate world is instantly forced into a defensive posture. Businesses reduce hiring, they postpone their aggressive expansion plans, and they ruthlessly cut operational costs. But it is really vital to remember that this contraction is unevenly applied. It's not a blanket effect. While a sector like hospitality or luxury retail might have to slash budgets instantly because discretionary spending evaporates, an industry like healthcare or essential utilities often remains relatively insulated. So it's a systemic defense mechanism for sure, but it doesn't hit every single industry with the exact same severity.
Naturally, the broader financial world does not just sit around waiting for quarterly reports to react. The stock market is essentially a forward-looking indicator. Markets usually price in a recession well before the economic data actually confirms we're even in one. And that is exactly why you see such extreme volatility early on. Investors are aggressively repricing assets based on expected future earnings declines, often before the corporate cost cuts even fully materialize in the real world. It's a rapid and honestly often chaotic realignment of expectations.
So who steps in to stabilize the system during this volatile realignment? Well, we see two very different institutional forces step up to the plate. You have monetary policy on one side, where central banks adjust interest rates and manage liquidity to try and stimulate activity, sort of tweaking the dials of the economy. And on the other side, you have fiscal policy. This is where governments might introduce targeted support measures or stimulus to inject capital directly into households and businesses. It's a dual approach, really: liquidity adjustments from the central bank and direct capital injections from the government.
Now, it is absolutely crucial to contextualize these events, because treating every recession as an identical catastrophe is a fundamental mistake. They vary widely in severity and duration. For example, it might actually surprise you to know that since World War II, the average US recession has only lasted about 10 months. 10 months! Whereas periods of economic expansion often last for years, sometimes a decade or even more. The severity depends entirely on the specific underlying structural imbalances that triggered the slowdown in the first place.
The economy breathes in and it breathes out. History consistently shows us that economies have gone through these contractions before. And you know what? They have always recovered over time. Every single time. This historical perspective is what decisively shifts the narrative away from fear and toward empowerment. We have navigated these exact waters before. While the slowdown phase absolutely comes with real, tangible challenges, empirical data clearly proves that recovery is an inevitable, entirely natural part of the broader economic cycle.
So, for the prepared, a recession isn't just about playing defense by minimizing debt or aggressively budgeting. It's really about strategic positioning. Yes, building a financial war chest and avoiding unnecessary leverage is critical, absolutely. But doing so allows you to transition from a mindset of mere survival to one of opportunity. When you plan for uncertain periods and maintain liquidity, you actually position yourself to capitalize on assets when the broader market is busy heavily discounting them out of sheer panic.
If you take away just one lesson today, make it this one. It's profound in its simplicity. A recession is a slowdown in the economy, not the end of it. It's a deceleration, a resetting of the board. When you view it through this structured analytical lens, you completely remove that catastrophic thinking. You can finally shed the anxiety that the morning news tries so desperately to sell you. You recognize a recession for exactly what it is, a manageable, predictable phase within an ongoing, highly dynamic system. So, I'll leave you with this question, the one you should really be asking yourself right now. If a recession is just a predictable phase of the economic cycle, are you merely bracing for impact? Or are you preparing to seize the opportunities that almost always follow the panic? Keep that in mind, stay curious, and make sure to subscribe to The Explainer for more deep dives into the powerful forces that shape our global economy. Thanks for hanging out with me, and I'll see you in the next Explainer.